Well, hello again everyone, and welcome to another of Mr. M's guides to, and this one is my guide to spring flowers. So in a moment we're going to go off for a walk and see what we can find growing in the hedgerows. But before we do, I think that a lot of us, when we think about springtime in Britain, one of the images that comes to mind is of carpets of bluebells in woodlands. And if you look down here, you can see that we've got a woodland carpeted with bluebells. They're not out yet. There are actually one or two just starting to poke through for the first time. And one of the reasons that they're not out yet is that we're up here on the edge of the moor. We're about 500 feet above sea level here, which means that the temperatures are a little bit cooler than they are down nearer to sea level. And that means that all of the plants are just a few weeks behind, really. We're just a little bit behind, so we're going to find a lot of the flowers that I want to find today, but we're not necessarily going to find them all, but we will in the weeks ahead. Anyway, come with me and let's see what we can find. Well, here we are, and we've come out today to the Avon Valley. This is the River Avon that goes down from Dartmoor out to the sea at Bantham, and it's one of several river avons in Britain actually, because the word Avon is an Old English word meaning river, so I quite often think of the River Avon as actually being the river. Anyway, we're also standing on this here. This is called Hunter's Path, and I don't know why this is called Hunter's Path, but it's probably because it used to belong to Mr. and Mrs. Hunter. But I prefer to think that it's been called Hunter's Path for 3,500 years, ever since Bronze Age man lived here. And if you take yourself back 3,500 years, you have to imagine this landscape looking very different. Instead of farmers' fields and a village and of South Brent down there in the valley, all of this would be covered in trees, every bit, over the top of this hill, over the back of that hill, down into the valley, all the way to the coast. And living in that in amongst those trees would have been a lot of the wild animals that are extinct today, including wolves and bears, which would have been maybe what Bronze Age man was hunting for when he was using this path to get from the lowlands up onto the open moor. Now, one of the things that botanists look for, and botanists are people who study plants, that tell them a bit about the past, are a group of flowers that are known as ancient woodland indicators, because where you find them, it's often the case that is where it would have once upon a time been covered in trees many hundreds of years ago. And a lot of the spring flowers that we're going to look for today are actually ancient woodland indicators, starting right here with this lovely little zone, which is exactly the kind of zone that makes my heart sing in the springtime. So let's have a look and see what we've got here. Well, first of all, one of my favourite ones here, this beautiful yellow flower, which has these very heart-shaped leaves here. This one is called Lesser Celandine, and it's after primrose, I suppose. It's the second of the yellow flowers to come out, and there's a greater celandine, and they're both members of the buttercup family. And then in behind it here, this one here, which is also quite recognisable. This one is called Greater Stitchwort. I prefer this one here, look. And one of the things about Greater Stitchwort is that it has these sort of 5 white petals divided into pairs. And I also think of this one as being the first of the white flowers that comes out in Devon on the lanes around here. And there's another one which is a lot smaller called Lesser Stitchwort. And then behind there we've got this one. These ones have only just been coming out in the last week or so, really. And this is called Red Campion, even though it's bright pink. And what all the campions have is they've got this little balloon-shaped thing behind the petals, which is called a bladder. And there's various species of campion. There's one called bladder campion, actually. And then there's a slightly larger one, which is white, which you can find by the coast. That's called sea campion, but that one is a little bit rarer to find. And then, of course, here we've got one of well, I suppose this really is one of my favourite spring flowers. And you know the poem, roses are red, violets are violet, and here they are looking absolutely beautiful. And there's lots of other things going on in this hedgerow as well. We've got some of the hard fern, we've got some of the hart's tongue, and I think there's even a little bit of polypody somewhere in there that I saw a moment ago. But there's loads and loads of things to see, and now we'll go off and see what else is lurking in the undergrowth. So we've come here to this lovely spring bank, and on it we've got primrose. I'll get out of the sunshine, and then there's some. Oh, there's actually, it's a lovely little spot here, isn't it, with the violets and the celandine. But primrose, I really think of as the very first of the spring flowers that comes out on the Devon lanes, and it's been out here for several weeks already, and it will be out for several weeks to come, looking absolutely lovely. And you know, one of the nice things about becoming familiar with the flowers as they come out through the year and at springtime is that they become like friends, you know, and each year that they come out you go, oh yeah, there you are, I remember you from last year, and you get to know them better. And particularly at this time when we're not able to see our friends, I feel quite lucky that I've got all of these friends to come out and see as well. Just while we're here, I just notice lurking in amongst this little patch here in front of it, we've got this little plant here, which hasn't got flowers on it yet, but it will have. And you can see on this one that the leaves sort of form a little wheel around the stalk, and there's a name for that, and that's called a whorl, which is spelt W-H-O-R-L. And when you find plants with their leaves in a whorl like that, they belong to a family called the bedstraw family. And we're going to go and look for a different one of those, which is one that you're probably more familiar with. So let's go. So I've managed to get the camera off the cameraman, and here he comes now. Say hello, Sal! So the other thing is that at this time of year, it's not just down around the flowers growing out of the hedgerows that we're looking at, it's also the time of year when the trees in the hedgerows are starting to come into blossom. And here's a nice example, and one of the things, one of the first trees that you might recognise. This one is oh well, you know the poem, roses are red, violets are violet. Well, we'll just change that one again to roses are white, violets are violet, because this is a blackthorn tree, which is a member of the rose family, and it's also really the first hedgerow tree to come into blossom. It's quite similar to the hawthorn in that it's got these quite vicious spikes on it, but the difference, one of the main differences, is that the blackthorn tends to come into flower before the leaves come out on it, and with the hawthorn it tends to be the leaves that come out first and then the flowers that come out. But what's particularly useful about the blackthorn is, of course, that this is the tree that is where you need to come in the autumn when you want to collect sloe berries, which are sort of purpley black. They're a bit smaller than grapes, and they're used in lots of flavourings, and you know, you can use them in lots of cooking things. They're mostly used, I think, for flavouring gin. But that's blackthorn. And also thinking about drinks, I've spotted some down here. Yeah, here. Earlier on we were talking about heath bedstraw and the bedstraw family, and in here we've got another member of the bedstraw family, and this one you can see it has these leaves in the wheels or the whorls around the stem, and the stem is quite a square stem. And this bedstraw family, this one is got lots of names actually. If you look it up in a book, you're going to find that this one's called cleavers. But depending on which part of the country you're in, it's also known as sticky bob, it's known as sticky jack, it's known as goosegrass. I think that's because geese like to eat it, and I think that's the case. And where I was born and where I grew up in Hampshire, we always used to call it sticky willy. And this is the one that you can stick onto your clothes and on people's backs when they're not looking. And a bit later on in the year, this one will come into a flower, and it's actually in the same family, the bedstraw family, as the coffee plant. Coffee is a member of the bedstraw family as well. And the white flower will then be pollinated, and it will turn into a fruit. And inside the fruit there will be a seed. And if you collect those seeds, you can dry them and roast them, and they produce a coffee flavoured drink apparently called, Cleaver's Coffee. And I'm sort of thinking that maybe this year, depending on how long it is before we all get to see each other, I might have a go at making that, although I've read that it's quite a time-consuming business, but we'll see how we get on. Anyway, that is Cleaver's, and that is the bedstraw family. Okay, let's see what else is around. So we haven't got much further, and we've come across another friend of mine here, and this one here is forming this great big carpet, and actually there's plenty of the hedge bedstraw in there, but the one that we're looking at is this one here, and it's very easy to walk past because this little stalk here, this is actually this plant in flower, so it's not one of the ones that shouts, "Look at me!" But it's called dog's mercury, and it's another ancient woodland indicator. And then also nestled in amongst it, because this stuff does all grow really well together, there's this one here. Oh, just been stung by a stinging nettle. It's also in here. This has got a really very obvious sort of quite large arrow-shaped leaf, and this one's got various names. I call it arum, which is, I suppose, really the correct scientific name for it. If you think of us as being humans, being Homo sapiens, this one has a scientific name as well, which is Arum maculatum, but I don't know if that's how you're meant to say it. Maybe you're meant to say Arum maculatum or Arum maculatum. I'm not quite sure, but it has a couple of other names. Some people call it lords and ladies, and it's also known as cuckoo pint in some places. And later in the year, in the sort of autumn time, it will have a really defined stalk of bright orange berries, which is really easy to see, and it's sort of quite stiff and sits upright, but those berries aren't edible, so don't go eating those, okay? So we're a little bit further on, and this is one that I've been looking out for because I know it's around, and this is the one that's getting ready for the big takeover. This is going to be everywhere. In fact, if you live down in the valleys, it's probably out already in force, but at the moment it looks a little bit like a fern, and it's a member of the carrot family. And if you imagine a carrot growing in the ground with its leaves above the ground like that, you can see that's very similar to the sort of leaves that you get on a carrot, but this one is in fact called cow parsley, and it belongs to quite a large family. That carrot family is quite large, and any minute now this one is going to take over the hedgerows. It's going to be everywhere, and it's going to be about 1 metre high, and this is the first little bit that I've found here so far that's just starting to flower. And the name of this family, it's got a posh name, or most plant families do. Its real name is, these are umbellifers, and the way I try and remember that is that these little white flowers here are on these umbels, these little stalks that you can see, and I kind of think of that as being a little umbrella that a tiny person could stand underneath. And so a lot of the umbellifers have got that kind of shape, and that's what you're going to find. But we'll find some more of those in the weeks ahead. So that was my guide to spring flowers, and as more flowers come out, maybe I will do another guide a little bit later on in a few weeks' time. If you enjoyed that, look out for some of my other guides that will be coming soon. The next one, I think, will be my guide to foraging. So you can look forward to seeing what things you can eat that are growing out of the hedgerows. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, or follow me at on my Instagram account, which is busking_teacher. couple of other things before I go. If you're wondering about the hat and why I'm wearing the hat when the sun is shining, that is because I don't want anyone to know that I'm going bald. The other thing is that you may notice over the course of these guides that my beard starts to get a bit bushier, and that is because I'm not going to cut it until we all get a chance to see each other again. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon.